Hello, and welcome back To Lead is to Learn, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of leadership together. Whether you're a returning listener or joining us for the first time, I'm truly grateful you've chosen us as your companion upon your leadership development journey. Our mission here is simple: to empower you with the knowledge, skills, and insights needed to excel in leadership. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to welcome each of you, whether this is your first time or you're a regular listener. Each of you are a valued member of our community. Your trust in us is invaluable, and it's a privilege to contribute towards your growth. Speaking of growth, did you know that To Lead is to Learn is brought to you by Lambda Solutions? At Lambda, we specialise in leadership development and coaching, dedicated to empowering individuals like you to become the best leaders possible. If you're ready to elevate your leadership skills, or if your organisation is seeking guidance to achieve its leadership goals, I encourage you to explore the Lambda way by visiting our website at www.thelambda.co.uk to learn more about how we can directly assist you. Thank you for being part of our community. Together, let's continue learning and growing. And remember, following and sharing our podcast can help us grow our community and impact even more leaders. In today's special episode, we will be talking to an experienced leader about their experience of leadership, challenges they have faced, and any thoughts and visions for the future.
Let's be honest, this isn't about Brent Peters. There'd been no football club, so all the history would have all gone. People around the club see similarities in me and Fergie. I signed David May, who's the treble winner at Manchester United. Anybody who knows me, I'm like a dog with a bone, I won't let go. Always give them a story, because if you don't, they'll make their own story up. Managing and coaching, and I still say this to this day, they're two different roles. The chairman turned out to be a bit of a villain, and he disappeared. The two things that footballers want, they want money, and if they can't get money, they want to play in a decent facility. Probably 15 years ago, they'd say I were a madman. I went through a personal bankruptcy to save the football club.
Without further ado, here's Brent Peters, manager of Bacup Borough Football Club and the world's longest serving football manager. So I ask everyone who comes onto my podcast this, and it's that everyone has a story that has got them to where they are now. Can you give us a brief sort of introduction to how you ended up where you are at the moment?
Right, so I'm the manager of Bacup Borough Football Club. In certain quarters, I'm allegedly the longest serving manager in world football. And where I got myself here, I started as a young boy, as like everybody does, playing football. Unfortunately, whilst I was having trials for Blackburn Rovers at the time, I suffered a bad break playing football from a school team at the time, actually, and I fractured my femur and I damaged my ACL, which now players are coming back from ACL injuries, but at the time it was quite bad for myself. So it was from that, even though I have come back and I've played football, what's happened is that I got involved in coaching with Frank Casper and Martin Dobson at the time with the management team at Bury Football Club. They got me into coaching, and basically from that situation has set me on the pathway to where I am today.
So when you started out with your coaching, what new skills did you learn by doing that coaching which you hadn't had before?
Well, you know, I have this perception of football and in-depth of the game, but let's get one thing straight. In football's football. It's like anything. If you get to understand it, you understand the game, you understand. It's kind of not rocket science. It's like anything else. You understand it. You know, in life, in general, now in society and in any walk of life at what you do, you've usually got to pass exams along the way to get steps up the ladder. I have this situation in terms of, the coaching badges. Whilst they're important, there's supposed to be an end goal when you pass all your badges. Invariably, there isn't an end goal, and it's not an equal playing field. Because take our country, for instance, they'll bring in foreign coaches and foreign managers. So, guys and gals who spent a lot of money on the coaching qualifications, it kind of ends up where they spent all this money, but they've nowhere to go with it. They can't get a job. Now, that's not what it should be all about. It should be, in some respects, making sure that it guarantees you to get a job. Now, I could be cynical here in some respects and say that having the qualifications is basically a license to print money for the football associations around the world. Because if you've got the coaching qualifications, even if you've got the pro license, it doesn't guarantee you anything. And it doesn't mean to say if you haven't got it, you don't understand the game and you don't understand the ethos of the game. So for me, I just think, yeah, you've got to have it. It's important you have it, but it's important you have it for the reasons that it's supposed to get you a job at the end of it, because you qualify for that job. But invariably, the jobs don't come for the reasons I've just said.
Did you go about getting your coaching badges when you started coaching, or was it something that you later on started doing then?
No, I did it when I started coaching, because at the time I was young, I was ambitious. I've obviously always been interested in football, and being blessed in some respects of being close to guys that are in the game, already in the professional game. I learned so much from them. This is one of the situations that I talk about. I mean, England won the World Cup in 1966. Now, I'd like the question being asked, how many of those guys behind Sir Alf Ramsey and his backroom staff had coaching badges? They wouldn't have had them. They were classed in them days as trainers. Like the manager would be the manager, Sir Alf Ramsey would be the England manager, and, his backroom staff would be classed as trainers and not coaches. It's just words, aren't they? But the football, everything's still the same. So really, if you think about it, if you go back to 1966, to the England winning World Cup team, a lot of those players that played in that team, like the late Bobby Charlton, Jackie Charlton, Nobby Stiles, they really won't have been coached in due respects. They will have been organised and managed. And if you look at the modern day game towards the game back in 1966 when we won the World Cup, the manager picked players to fit the position, if you will. So if I'm going to sit on here and say, would you have said that, let's say, Nobby Stiles, based on modern day football today, was a world-class player? You'd say, no, Nobby Stiles wasn't a world-class player. But what Nobby Stiles did and did well, for the world-class players to shine, or the more kind of finesse player to shine, you have to have certain players in your team that can spoil the other team. And Nobby Stiles, I would class as that spoiler. So he wasn't necessarily a world-class player, but now they talk about world-class players. That's what they talk about. If you're in the England setup, you're a world-class player. But again, I'm old school and I disagree with that, because, it's horses for courses. It is what it is. You need your professional player. Like Bobby Moore, go back to the 1966 team, the late Bobby Moore was a fantastic footballer. He was a role model. He was quality. But again, I come back to certain individuals in that England setup that won the World Cup. You wouldn't class as actually world-class quality finesse footballers, is my point. And when you go back to asking me the question about, did you take your qualifications when you started? Well, yeah, really, because I knew if I wanted to get where I wanted to get to the top of my profession, I would have had to take these coaching badges. And now I was quite ambitious, but I was in my own mind, I knew which path I wanted to take. And I kind of feel that managing and coaching, and I still say this to this day, the two different roles. Where now, because throughout football, they call the manager the head coach. But technically, coaching and managing, it doesn't mean to say that the manager can't coach. Of course, the manager can coach. And of course, the manager knows all the ethos of the game. But the actual role of a manager is totally different to the role of a coach, because the role of a coach is like it says on the tin. You're coaching, you're helping somebody to develop a skill set, and you're helping somebody to develop the mindset, right? Whereas that's fine, that's good, that's part of the game. But a manager, somebody has to manage those players. And the management side of things becomes, especially the higher you go in terms of, if you come away from youth football and you're more into the first team arena of any football club, that is where the manager's got to make some ruthless decisions, because you can only play 11 players. You've got to get the balance right, but you might have a squad of 22, 25 players. So somewhere along the line, you're upsetting people by keeping people out. So for me, it's proved it's on so many occasions when clubs or chief executives, what they've done, they'll see that there's a good coach at a football club, and they've appointed or stepped a coach up to be manager. And when he stepped up to be manager, he's failed. But he's a tremendous coach. I mean, I can sit here and name you people who've done that, straight away. I mean, let's take the late Bobby Charlton. He went to Preston North End and managed Preston North End. He failed as a manager. It didn't work out for him. For whatever reason, it just didn't work. Now, equally, I can give you names of coaches that have been top coaches in the profession. Every player that's played or been developed under these will tell you, really terrific coach. But when they've been stepped up as a manager, they fail. Brian Kidd, for a prime example, he stepped up into the arena having worked round the great Sir Alex Ferguson, right? And he was a top footballer. But then he goes to Blackburn Rovers and takes on board and manages at Blackburn Rovers. He fails as a manager. Steve McLaren, prime example, top coach, good at his job. But every job he's had as a manager, he's failed. He doesn't work out for him, because for me, he's not a manager. Because it's like, the best way I can describe it is that if you go with a driving instructor, the instructor will sit at the side of you and he'll talk calm, collected. He'll tell you how to hold your hands on the steering wheel and let the steering wheel glide through your hands. He'll go through how best, reference points on when you're doing a 3-point turn and what you should be doing and giving you the reference point. He will turn around and calm and collected, where he will demonstrate how you should position your vehicle when you're going to do a reversing into a street on your near side, right? He will do that calm and collectedly. A coach in football is exactly the same. A coach in football will set drills up. The drills could be team related, so he will explain to team A how they should go about their duties against team B. So there's a means to an end. He will equally demonstrate, if it's a kind of a junior coach, where when I say a junior coach, I mean, if he's coaching junior football, he will developing young players. He will coach them how to receive a football and how to pass a football. He will educate them in how best to, open their body up and receive a ball on the half turn. All these things are part and parcel of coaching in football. And they're calm and collected. But a manager's role is the end product. It's when he's got this group of players that have been developed, and he's now got these group of players and they're now ready to go into a team structure. And when they go into a team structure, the manager will make the decision, right, I want my players to play 4-4-2. So what he will do then, he will cherry pick the players that will fit into a 4-4-2 system. And there'll be certain players that might not be able to fit into a 4-4-2 system. But he will pick those players into a 4-4-2 system, and the coaches will still continue to develop them players. The coaches will be still there to kind of develop them and make them into a better player and make them have more awareness, while the manager actually has to make kind of ruthless, demanding decisions, because he's got to decide if he's got three players that can play left wing, say, in a 4-4-2 formation, and he's got three players that can play right wing, he can only play one of them, right? And equally, in a football team, like in any team, I come out with a good mindset and a good conversation that I will have all the time. Is like, for instance, my coach might say to me, I'm not happy about so-and-so player. His attitude stinks. He's sulking in sessions. He's doing this and doing that, or he's not doing this and doing that. And he'll say to me, you know, I don't want him. I don't want him near me. And I'll turn around as a manager and say, listen, one thing you can't have in a group of people, you can't have 11 or 22 choir boys. Every person in that group have all got different characteristics. They've all got different mindsets, right? And usually, especially like if you've been in football, you'll understand this better than anybody. A lot of the footballers that make it in football are street kids. You know, if you go back in the time, there were kids that's grown up on a council estate and probably been, you know, no disrespect to nobody, but probably been kicked up. You know, and they've had to fend for themselves and they've had to fight for everything that they can get. Well, they turn out to be probably the better players, really, because when you're going into a game scenario, they're ready for the fight. They want the fight. They want to win. It's like, that's what it's all about. It's the winning mentality. But they can equally be hard to manage because they are what it says on the tin, the street players. You know, some coaches can't handle that. And if they had to become a manager, that kind of softly coaching mentality to make them better players, you want something different when you're managing, because you've got to manage the mentality. You've got to manage them. And if you to like keep releasing people because they're hard to deal with, well, you're not going to make it in the game. You know, it's just not for you. And that's why I always say, in football terms, I'll say, listen, you can't have a changing room full of choir boys. You know, some are going to be easy to manage. Some are going to be extremely difficult to manage. But as a manager, you've got to take the good with the bad and deal with that all the time.
I like what you're saying there in terms of the difference between a coach and a manager. I definitely agree with that. If we're looking at developing managers, then what should be the best schooling for developing future managers if, you know, coaching isn't necessarily the route to get to management?
Well, managing, this is my personal opinion, the biggest attribute I feel a manager has to have. And I also believe that this is what, if you want to become a top referee, I also believe that a referee must have. And that is man management skills. If you don't know how to deal with people and you can't deal with people, you're not going to make it in the game. It's not going to happen. The biggest strength of as a manager, I firmly believe, is man management. Man management is how you talk to people, and you've got to get people that believe in your honesty. I mean, I remember several years ago, a former professional player said to me, Brent, you need to go on a Dale Carnegie course. Now, for those who don't know what Dale Carnegie is, I mean, you know what Dale Carnegie, I'm sure you do. Basically about how to speak to people and influence people.
Yeah, based on his book, which I'm sure our listeners will definitely have.
And do you know what my reply was to that? I don't need to go on no Dale Carnegie course. I am Brent Peters. I am who I am. I don't need to, in a roundabout way, go on courses that, in my opinion, is basically somebody in front of you that's giving you BS. You know what I mean? Whereas I don't give BS. I say it as it is. I'm a straight batter, straight down the line, and I feel that people buy into that because whether they like it or they don't like what I'm saying, they know it's coming from my heart and it's honesty. And for me, any manager that's worth his salt has got to be like that. I don't agree with how you should speak and influence people. I'm not here to knock the Dale Carnegie courses or Dale Carnegie books or anything. I'm here to say it as I believe. Because the best way to influence a person, in my opinion, you treat people how you would expect to be treated yourself. And you can only be yourself. Now, you've got to be straight and honest. Them are the two commodities I think I have. I think I'm straight and I'm honest. Now, not everybody will like what I'm saying to them, but at least I'm being honest. And when I sit down with a player and I have him on a one-to-one, we relate to certain instances in games and what's happened. And that will lead me into the conversation to try and get the mindset to understand why I have done something. I'll give you a perfect example. This only happened in our last game here at Bacup Borough, right? Last game. Now, we play a certain shape, and in that shape, there's certain roles that are more demanding than other roles. The 7 and 11 role are really demanding because they've got to have pace and power going that way, but they've also got to have plenty of energy because when the game breaks down, they go the other way because they've got to drop back in to make us more compact, to make us, more solid unit. So they've got to work up and down, and they've got to do that for the full duration of an hour and a half of the football match, which is very, very tough. There comes a time as a manager that you've got to make a decision because you might want to freshen it up by utilising a substitute. So what then happens? I look at what's going on the pitch in front of me. Some players can have different attributes. So this situation that I'm talking about on Saturday, I'm looking at a situation where there's not much to choose between the 7 and 11. Nothing to choose between them. But the 7 contributes quite a bit more in terms of he's probably been our most consistent player most of the season, and he contributes more. He's more positive where the goals come from than what the 11 is. That doesn't mean to say the 11 is not equally as good a player. He is. But managers have to make decisions. Now, when it came down to a situation after about 70 minutes on Saturday, we were losing the game 2-0. So I felt I desperately wanted goal scorers on the football pitch to try and claw the game back. So straight away, if I've got a striker on the bench that can play in number 7 or 11 position, I am not going to leave him on the bench when he's another goal scorer. So the way my mindset works is I'm going to take off the one who least scores to put this goal scorer on, which is what I did. Nobody likes to be substituted. Nobody likes to be taken off. So as this number 11 comes off the pitch, he's throwing his hands up in the air and he's asking a question. Why have you took me off? And I've gone like, I'll speak to you after. Game's still going on, but I've made the decision to take you off. Well, his mind will play mind games. When I sit down with him, because obviously his head's all over the place, and the reason why his mind was playing mind games was because it always seemed to be him that was getting taken off every game and not the number 7. So one of the words he used when in his heat of battle or just coming off from heat of battle, which I didn't like, was you've obviously got your favourites. And he used that word favourites because he was the one keep coming off and the other player was staying on. So me as a manager, when I sat down with him after he'd showered and everything, and I said, right, I'll speak to you after in my office. So he comes in my office, sits down, and straight away I went, listen, I am not having that word about favourites around me because I don't have no favourites. I go off what I see in front of me. I go off stats, like I've just explained to you and the listeners. I have turned around and said, listen, at the end of the day, the lad coming on scores goals. The lad 7, although you do score goals, but not as many as the 7 scores. And I don't think you've been as positive as the 7 in the last few games. So equally, this is my mindset. Losing again, I need to bring the least one off who's going to score goals, which obviously at this moment in time is you. So that's why you was replaced. So if that's the case, that's got nothing to do with favoritism. That's just my mindset and the reasons for it. So then when he hears that conversation, he immediately apologizes for using that word, because I've sat down in the cold light of day and explained my reasons. He's still not 100% happy because he's been taken off. So he then has his point of view, and he said, well, on the goal scoring, I think, the number 7 scored probably about 4 goals more than me. So I then turned around on a positive and I said, yeah, but why do you think the reason why he scored 4 goals more than you? And he's thinking about it. And he said, probably because he takes the chances. I said, that's the word. He has a go, whereas you don't. You will kind of take a pass more and release the ball, but you're in a better position, really, to execute the shot. So if you'd have took the shot in the first place, believed in yourself, you'll probably score more goals probably than the 7, because you're in great positions. But you don't do. And until you start doing that, we're always going to be in this little scenario that we're in now, because you're always going to be second to the 7, because he's got a mindset where he's positive and wants to be positive. So when he gets in anywhere near that goal, he's going for it. Whereas you're positive, but anytime you get near that goal, you shy away from taking that shot and give it somebody else to take the shot. So basically what you're doing, you're passing responsibility. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that this is part of man management, because what you're doing, you're speaking to him, and kind of equally, it's a two-edged sword, because not only are man managing, but you're actually coaching. But you're not coaching physically on a football pitch. You're actually sat with him and you're coaching him by words in terms of what he should be doing out there on the football pitch, and the reasons why he seems to be the one every week being brought off, even though he starts the week after. He's the one that actually doesn't play the full 90 minutes and the other player might.
Yeah. In that situation as well, what you're doing is you're almost setting the expectations and what you expect of him next game if he doesn't want to come off.
100%. 100%. So going back to the management situation, this is where it's the manager that's got to make the decisions of picking the team, and he's also got to make the decisions of who he brings off, and then he's got to have the reasons why. And I can give you a really good scenario here on this subject. And the scenario I can give you, I signed David May, who was a treble winner at Manchester United, to play for me here at Bacup Borough. Now, as you know, he's played under, I would say, 2 are probably up there amongst not only the greatest players, but greatest managers. He played under Kenny Dalglish at Blackburn Rovers when they won the Premiership title. And he played under Sir Alex Ferguson. And, then he's come to me at Bacup Borough and played under me. So he's been in the changing room with me at Bacup Borough, and he sat there and he pulled me after one game, and we're having a chat over an orange juice, and he said to me, Brent, obviously I've always been in a pro environment, a professional environment. And I've always been in an environment where the manager, he kind of doesn't really explain anything and doesn't explain why he's done something. He'll just do it. And that's how it is. He said, but you kind of go that extra yard when you go in a changing room. You actually explain everything. I can't get my head. Why do you explain everything to the group? Why you've done something? And I went, good point, David. The reason for that is because by me explaining why I'm doing something, the collective group understand what I'm thinking. And by understanding what I'm thinking, it stops any undercurrents. Because if they don't understand what I'm thinking, they're mates together. So some lads will travel in together. And when they're travelling in or going home in the car, they'll be talking about the game, or they'll be talking about anything to do with the game. And what they'll do, their mind straight away will play mind games, and their mind will tell them what they think I am doing. And what they'll do, they'll say to somebody like, the reason why you weren't on the substitutes bench is because why he's left you out completely. You watch him. He picks in for that reason, and that in for that reason, and in for that reason, which could be far away from the truth. right? And the lad who's been the guilty one, who's on the end of it, and he goes, yeah, you're right, you're right. So what that does, David, it can breed anarchy because little talking in the little huddles. So by me being kind of upfront and saying, listen, it's been a tough decision. I've had to think long and hard why I've done this today. The reason why I've done this, I think I've been pretty well consistent every time this has happened. My best striker is now coming back from suspension. But whilst he's been away, we haven't lost a game. We've been producing goals. We've been scoring goals. So I don't think it's right to bring him straight back in because that sends the wrong message. So whether you guys think it is or think it isn't, as the manager, I don't think it is. So I am sitting him out on the bench today, and he will have to wait for his opportunity to come onto that pitch and obviously try and get his shirt back. But this is the best way I can describe it. And they've got to run with it then because they fully understand. So David May comes back to me and he goes, I understand now, yeah, because that doesn't happen in the pro game. And I said, but that's the trouble. Managers in the pro game, players will just, I can't understand why I've been left out. And they'll be looking at each other. Why am I left out? And then other players will say, I can't believe he's left you out. Well, what's he left you out for? You've been the best trainer this week. You were thinking absolute man at match last week. Why is he left out? They don't know. And straight away, that breeds a little bit of wondering what's going on. Whereas by the manager coming in and saying, right, boys, this is what we're doing today. I've thought long and hard about the opposition. I've thought long and hard about how we've done. I'm telling you now, it might shock a few people. It might not. But this is why I have done this today. Lewis Byrne is back from suspension. He scored so many goals in so many games. He was flying before he got his suspension. But equally, we've had 3 top games since he's been suspended. We've done very, very well. I think if I bring him straight back in, it sends the wrong message through the changing room. Whereas I've already spoke to Lewis. He fully understands the situation. So I didn't leave it till we got in the changing room to name the team. I preempted him the day before. He's fully all fair with the situation, and I'm going with the same team that won last week. So basically, the moral of this part of the story is, as a manager, I am more open and transparent in why I've done something. If the lads don't agree, they know my door's open to come and speak to me after about it. But at least they can't go with their own thought process and drop little bombs.
What you've kind of described there is almost maintaining the culture within the dressing room of openness. You communicate with them, they know their place, and you've got that open door policy if anyone wants to challenge you, which is a very brave sort of approach to have.
Yeah, that's right. So David may have never been in that situation. He couldn't understand where he's all of a sudden now he's playing for a manager that's so open. He's never had that. And then all of a sudden he's got it. So he questions me, why are you telling them all these things? And then I give him the answer.
In terms of David May then, how did you manage to persuade him to drop down the leagues to your level and play for you? What did you say to him?
Well, I've got to be perfectly honest. It wasn't one of them where we weren't a friend of a friend or anything like that. There was nothing like that. He'll have known of me. I got his telephone number, would you believe? I rang a member of the press who I was quite close to. And I've been quite close to several members of the press, really, because, again, on my working up the ladder, a certain late manager, he's not with us now, he's passed away, sadly, Tommy Docherty, always said to me, Brent, if the press ring you and want to know anything, if the press want to speak to you about anything, always give them a story, because if you don't, they'll make their own story up. And half the time, it's probably not the truth. If you don't want them to know or don't want them to print something, just say, look, I'll tell you this, but it's off the record. Sacrosanct, don't print it. Be open with them. So basically, that were a tip that I'd always got. that's exactly what used to happen with me. The press would ring up. If there was sort of some news stories, I'll tell you what, we'll give Brent a ring and see if he's got anything for us. So I'm sure Brent will have something for us. And that's what used to happen. Now, I got a good relationship with the press, so I could speak to him on the other side. What I mean by that is, I rang a contact that I had in the press and I said, listen, I need to speak to David May. Is there any chance? Have you any way I can contact him? And discreetly, obviously, they passed me his number. So this is the first contact. He doesn't know me, I ain't got a clue, but I ring him. I knew he'd had a short spell at Burnley, which is just over the hill, and I knew he'd had a bit of a falling out situation with the then manager Stan Turner. So I rang him up, and when I rang him up, I said, listen, I'm struggling. I'm really, really struggling for a centre-back. And the lad who were playing at centre-half with me at the time was a lad called Ian Hughes, he actually was a Welsh international, Ian Hughes, and he played in first team at Borough. He was in the youth setup coming through the ranks when I was youth team coach at Borough. So that's how my contact with him. And Stan Turner actually sold him when he got the manager's position at Borough to Blackpool back in the day for, I think it was about 250,000. So Ian Hughes went to Blackpool. He played for Blackpool, and I'm sure he captained Blackpool. And when Blackpool won one of the playoffs, in fact, he scored in one of the playoff finals for Blackpool. And then when he was having a bit of issues with his knee, he went to Huddersfield, and he had a spell at Huddersfield, and then he had to take early retirement because he was having problems with his knee. So when he took early retirement, kind of, from the professional game, I got him in here at Bacup Borough. But in a training accident, he cracked one of his ribs. So when he had this cracked rib, I was desperate for an experienced centre-back. So I got in touch with David there. I asked him straight away. He replied to anything, but he went, no, thanks very much, but I'm not really interested. But anybody who knows me, I'm like a dog with a bone, I won't let go. So a few days later, I rang him again. And I went, Dave, do you not fancy just coming into the club and having a coffee with me? I'd just like to sit down and have a chat with you. Yeah, all right. Because he didn't live too far from me at the time. He lived just down the road, probably about 3 miles down the road. So to be fair to him, he came in and he seen all the pictures on the wall, clubs I'd managed, and some ex-players involved in those teams. He saw the setup. And I was just being honest with him. I just sat there in front of him. I was just being Brent Peters, totally honest. And he bought into me. Didn't really buy into the club. He bought into me. And he bought into what I was trying to do for the club. So that rubber stamped it. He came on, and because people said to me, you're joking, are you? You know you're going to get David May here. I went, watch me. Because it didn't faze me. And one of the things I was positive about all the time, David May wasn't on his own. I use David May quite a lot when I speak to people because he's probably the most high-profile player because he's been at Manchester United. Obviously, we're a treble winner at Manchester United. But there's been others. And one thing about me is I've never been fazed because I'm an ambitious manager, but my age has caught me up now, so my days of going to a top club now is not going to happen. But the fact of the matter is, whatever I was doing, even though it was a club like Bacup Borough, it didn't faze me from picking a phone up and speaking to the professionals who was dropping out the game for one reason or another to try and attract them to come to play under me. Because I'm a firm believer they can either say yes or they can say no. That's it. If they say no, well, it's no. But they might say yes. It's like buying the raffle ticket. If you don't buy the blinking lottery, you're not going to win it. So it's having that positive mindset. And I'm very positive. I don't like negative people around me because I'm really positive.
Did you know that Lambda Solutions is your gateway to unlocking the secrets of effective leadership, as well as exploring leadership psychology? We not only have this podcast where we explore some of the most topical concepts within leadership and connect you with the wisdom and experience of a community of leaders. We also have a growing treasure trove of leadership wisdom just waiting to be discovered. I would love to invite you to explore the Lambda Library, our very own hub of thought-provoking articles and blogs, carefully crafted to spark your imagination, challenge your thinking, and ignite your leadership potential. The best part? It's completely free, and we are continually looking to update our content to keep you engaged and informed. It's all part of our dynamic journey of learning, and we can't wait for you to join us. Whether you're a budding leader, a seasoned professional, or simply looking to enhance your leadership skills, our content caters to your growth. We would also like to extend our hand. If you have a message to share and would like to submit an article to our library, simply get in touch through the contact form on our website. We would love to add your wisdom to our leadership library. Are you ready to begin your exploration? Simply visit our website at www.thelambda.co.uk and navigate to the Lambda Library. You'll find our growing library of leadership articles waiting for you. You can then add us to your bookmarks to supplement your sources of consistent, high-quality leadership content. Discover insights, uncover strategies, and elevate your leadership game. In terms of managers then, I think you've already mentioned him. I'm a big Manchester United fan, so, Sir Alex Ferguson is, for me, the best manager there's ever been, particularly in terms of the management that he had. So a lot of his ex-players still call him the boss, and he has that sort of influence over his players that he managed to ride a long time, and you've also served a long time. Do you see any similarities between the way that you approach management and what you saw him doing?
You know what, Chris? I'm probably not the person to answer that question, because the reason why I'm saying I'm probably not the person is because it's easy for me to sit here and think, you know what, I am like Fergie. I do everything like Fergie does. But I'm Brent Peters, and it just so happens that I do things like Fergie does. But let me tell you, there's some old guys here that help out at the football club. One in particular who helps out at the football club all around the club. He's here every day, most days, potters about, and he'll go out to the shops now and he'll buy the sock tape for the lads. And when he comes on, he doesn't call me Brent. He won't say where's the gaffer. He doesn't say where's Brent. He'll say to my personal assistant Deborah, where's Fergie? He actually nicknames me Fergie. This is why I'm saying I shouldn't really answer this question. He sees a similarity. I can tell you that people around the club see similarities in me and Fergie. I've actually mellowed players that played under me. They'll tell you probably 15 years ago, they'd say I were a madman. He's fucking mad. If he starts fucking hairdryer at you, he's mad. Now they're saying I'm mellowed. With age, I've kind of mellowed. In all honesty, I'm Manchester United. There are a lot of similarities, but I don't try to do that. It's just natural. Things are done because I read about things that Fergie's done, like on the good side of it, in terms of how he's helped players, in the personal lives. Well, I've done that. You went and interviewed some players that's played under me that's not even here now. One player in particular that comes to mind is one of my former captains, a lad who used to be at Manchester United. He actually represented Manchester United at under 15s, under 16s. He was an England international, a lad called Adrian Bellamy, and he was from Old Trafford, from that area. Now, he'll tell you, if you interviewed him, I've done things for him and helped him in his personal life, like Fergie would do. There's lots of similarities between me and Fergie in terms of what I've done for players in their careers, although I've been more non-league and Fergie's been a man at the top. So there's a lot of similarity. And like I said, if you were speaking to my staff or people away from me, I'm 1,000% telling you they would class me as Sir Alex in a way. And like Brian White, the guy I'm talking about, he to this day walks in straight away. He'll pop his head and he'll say, "Where's Fergie?" Says it all the time.
I mean, that's an accolade I guess you must take great pride with.
Listen, when it was my 25-year anniversary here at the club, we didn't even celebrate properly because there's always that much that's going on, and we haven't got enough kind of helpers, if you will. So I wanted a proper, probably to raise money for the football club, but I wanted a special 25-year anniversary. You know, I wanted it to be so special, and the person that I really, really wanted, which would have made it, would have been Sir Alex. But it had been left to me to organise it all, and I just didn't have the time to do it. But definitely, that would have been absolutely fantastic for me to meet, Sir Alex.
In terms of accolades, you've recently been recognised for your tenure in the county game. How was that for you?
The 30-year award.
Yeah.
That didn't really blow me away, Chris, because of the award for me. It blew me away to be sat in a room. But when you're doing the job that we do, it's easy to be locked away in your own bubble. And when you're locked away in your own bubble, your mindset is about everything that you're doing on a daily, weekly basis for yourself. And you don't see, for every Sir Alex Ferguson out there and for every Brent Peters out there's several others. We're not unique. We're not on our own. But it's easy to forget that when you're out there doing your chores, what you have to do. And it was only when I was at the Lancashire Football Association headquarters that I'm sat in a room on a Sunday afternoon, didn't know what I was going for, didn't have a clue that it was anything to do with an awards afternoon for, longevity awards. But when I'm sat in there and I'm listening to the compare and there's people getting up and they're going through what they've done for grassroots football and in the grassroots, I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. And that's what I mean about it blew me away, because it's easy to say that people in the town are in the Rossendale Valley where Bacup is situated, and there's several little towns in the Rossendale Valley. And people around the Rossendale Valley, it's easy for them to say, but for Brent Peters, there wouldn't be a Bacup Borough Football Club. I turn around and say that is not quite correct. But for the business and community fraternity, there wouldn't be a Bacup Borough Football Club. But the fact that there is a Bacup Borough Football Club, the fact that Brent Peters is at the helm, getting the business fraternity and the community involved, means that there is obviously more interest in Bacup Borough. So that is the reason why Bacup Borough is still in existence. It is not because of Brent Peters. Somebody's got to steer the ship. And I just so happen to be the man that steers the ship.
Yeah. Being involved in non-league football myself for a while, I know that every single club has a handful of those volunteers that just do it and just they help out. No matter what you ask them, they will help out. Do you have many of them?
We don't have enough, to be fair, but the ones that we have, listen, I just talk about, rather than quantity, it's about quality. And the people that I have around me at Bacup Borough are just the diamonds. They're quality. They're absolute diamonds. And without them, I'd be in a mess, because I won't be able to do or execute what I do to keep this fantastic football club going. I wouldn't be able to do it. And it's with those chosen few, because they are a chosen few, but it frustrates me sometimes because, as we've just said there, for my 25-year anniversary, which would have been great for the club, not for me, for the club, if we'd have had more, we'd have been able to have had a proper event, because we could have designated a certain element to organise that event. But because we've got a chosen few and it's all hands to the deck, and it's a football season is 9 months, everything it's for today, not for tomorrow. You have to be on. So really, we didn't have the manpower or the time to execute what I really wanted to do. But going back to your question, the people we have, there isn't a lot of them, but the ones that are, they're the diamonds.
So with your accolade of being the longest serving manager in world football, well, supposedly, I guess there may be someone out there who's had longer, but you're the recognised longest serving manager.
Yeah, in club football.
Yeah, organised football. In terms of your tenure then, I want to go back to the beginning of the story because I've read that you basically got offered the job in a pub. Can you talk us through that?
Are we talking about my journey in football right from the beginning, or are we talking about my journey here in the 26 years at Bacup Borough?
Yeah, we're going to start from the beginning and then go through. So you getting offered the job in the pub, and then we're going to go through your time and the challenges you faced.
Right, so prior to me coming to Bacup Borough Football Club, I was a young, ambitious manager. When I say manager, coach, but wanted to be a manager. So if we go right the way back, what happened is, whilst I was at Bury Football Club on my first stint, at the time I was working with the youth team, and it was like the A and B team in the Lancashire League. And then what would happen? My group would be the schoolboys and the first year apprentices. So when it comes to Saturday, we'd have game time. And then if the first team were at home in the afternoon, I worked with a guy called Ray Pointer, played for Burnley in England. The manager of Bury Football Club at the time was Martin Dobson, and the first team coach was Frank Casper, who was former Burnley Football Club manager and former Burnley Football Club player, as Martin Dobson was. In the afternoon, because there was no money at the club and everything, everybody had to kind of muck in. So what used to happen in the afternoon, if the first team were at home, I became the club's kind of PA announcer, DJ, if you will, where I'd be spinning the disc and announcing the team and other events that were going on. That would be my job. Wilf McGuinness at the time was at Bury, former Manchester United, Busby baby. He took over from Sir Matt Busby for a short time when Sir Matt Busby retired. Well, I found myself working with Wilf. Well, Wilf at the time at Bury was the physio, but he'd also say that his job, away from being the physio, he was doing every other job that you could think of. One of them was feeding the club's cats and making sure that the venue was locked up at the end of the day. Now, because I was ambitious and I was young, I wanted to leave Bury and go and manage in my own right at a football club in the West Lancashire League. And I got talked out of it by Frank Casper, because he said to me, Brent, listen, doesn't matter what you're doing, what capacity you're in, once you're on that little merry-go-round of a football league club, you don't want to come off it, because once you come off it, you'll have a hell of a job to get back on it. So I took his advice and I stayed another season, but I was still itching and wanting to do something myself. So eventually I left Bury and I went to Burnley United. And I wasn't there long before I was headhunted to go to Rosendale United to be joint manager with the reserves. And my job was to bring in players that had the ability to be fighting and competing for a first team place. Now, that's what I did. So I went there, and in my time there, we won 6 trophies in 2 seasons. The first team manager's job came up at Rosendale United, and everybody thought, because I were born and brought up on the estate across road, and my late father was the director, they all thought that I'd be the favourite to get the job when the job became available. Anyway, for one reason or another, I didn't get the job. I went in, I put in for it, didn't get the job. They offered me to be the assistant manager with the manager that were going to be coming in. And I said, I'm not a number 2, I'm a number 1. I was fully focused on what I wanted to do, on my job. I'm not a number 2, I'm a number 1. So from that, I went to manage Glossop North End. So I went into Derbyshire and managed Glossop. I was successful there as a manager at Glossop. But when you go to these football clubs, we talked about people being straight, and when we talked about the Dale Carnegie situation, I'm facing a chairman that gives me belief that everything that were going to happen at Glossop, it sold me the club. He said they were an ambitious football club. They used to be a former football league club. They were owned by Ill Woods, who had something to do with Arsenal Football Club. He really sold it to me. So I went in there, but it turned out partly through my tenure that the chairman turned out to be a bit of a villain, and he disappeared. But I still stuck with my task in hand and finish the season as I set out to do. So I guided him to the first trophy in 16 years, but then I decided to leave. I went back to Borough Football Club for a time, where I become the chief non-league scout, which then led me to being back with the youth team again, but the manager. And he got me involved, actually, would you believe, with the first team. I spent quite a bit of time around the first team because, in Mike Walsh's words, he felt that I was more equipped to be dealing with more senior players than the younger players. But whilst I was there and I was loving every minute of it, we're involved in some big games, none more than at Manchester United in the FA Cup, the year that Gillespie made his debut. But towards the end of that season, my hometown club, Rosendale United, came calling. You know, they'd just suffered a relegation financially. They were going through a meltdown. They had lots of problems. And I had a business in the Rosendale Valley, a furniture removal and storage business. And every day, there weren't a day past where one of the directors would call in and have a brew with me and just trying his arm to try and get me back involved at Rosendale. Now, you know, I've got a good job at Bury. I'm involved with the first team. I still think that if I'd have stayed at Bury, who knows where my career path would have taken me, because I still think that I were quite respected by the directors. And I honestly believe, as what happens, that if they'd have sacked a manager and they'd appointed within, I would have had that opportunity, and it's whether I'd have grasped the opportunity. But what happened were, when my hometown club come calling, I always felt wherever I went in football, whatever I did, I might always regret never managing my hometown club, because it's a place where I've been brought up, and I were a ball boy for the club and raised money for the club growing up. So I decided, having spoken to Mike Walsh, who was the manager, who basically led me to believe that, or told me, he said, listen, if you want to take that job, I'll tell you now, as long as I'm the manager of this football club, if it doesn't work out for you, the door will always be open for you to come back here to Bury. So I did. I took the job at Rosendale United, my hometown club, and I just wielded all the dead wood out and built my own squad. Thankfully, at the end of the season, they just had a relegation, but I missed getting them back at the first attempt. We finished runners-up in the league, but I actually returned to Gig Lane in the final of a cup competition, and we beat St Helens in the final 1-0 to win a cup. So in the first year at Rosendale, we've won something. Then I moved on from Rosendale, and I got director of football at Accrington Stanley. I made a big mistake at Accrington Stanley, something I'm not proud of, but it cost me a little bit, and it's something that I'll always give advice to other people. You know, if you've made a gentleman's agreement, you stick to it, and don't let somebody try and sway you any other way, because it really affected me and it cost me. So I left my role as director of football at Accrington Stanley, but then went to Doncaster Rovers when it was, instead of it being like it is now, which is the Premiership, Championship, Division 1, Division 2, it was back in the day, it was Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, Division 4. Doncaster were languishing near the bottom of Division 4, and it was a season, I think it was one of the first seasons when the FA had introduced that there was a pathway into the Football League, and the bottom club in the Football League would drop out into the Conference National, and the top club would go into the Football League. So I was appointed then by the chairman to come in and work alongside Curry Dixon, former England and Chelsea striker, who was the manager. Our forte was to make sure, by hook or by crook, that the club maintained the status in the Football League. I'm glad to say that we achieved that against all odds. It was a season as well. We actually were involved in the very, very last game at the old Goldstone ground at Brighton, the famous old ground. It was the very last game. It got pulled down after that to put houses on, and the rest is history. They're in a new stadium now. But yeah, there was issues at Doncaster. They were going through a meltdown financially. I had a removal and storage business in Rosendale. I was commuting to Doncaster every day apart from 2, which was Thursday and Sunday. Rest of the time I was commuting and trying to run a furniture removal and storage business in the Rosendale Valley. And the club were going into administration. Even though there was a position for me there the following season, I felt that it was taking its toll, and it gut-wrenched me a little bit that I couldn't stay, even though they were a position for me. I just felt that I couldn't sustain it. I kind of needed to move on. So for a short time, I was kind of out in football. And then I ran a pub, where we're coming to now. We're in this public house called the Red Lion, which is situated. It's where a lot of former Burnley footballers go in, frequent. I were in there one Saturday night, and Bacup Borough had gone through a torrid time. They hadn't got any points. It was in September. They hadn't got any points on the board. They were going through a torrid time. They'd just been beaten 10-1, I think it was, against Tetley Walker, team from Warrington. And some of the lads at the time, they were obviously distraught. The club had no direction, everything. And some of the lads who played under me previously had said to the chairman, listen, we're going nowhere. You need to speak to Brent Peters. And, this is what's come back to me. The chairman's gone. Brent Peters ain't going to even think about coming to Bacup Borough. Listen, he's been at Accrington, he's been at Lincoln Doncaster, he's been at Bury, he's been at Rosendale. He's not going to come to Bacup. There's no chance. And they said, listen, just speak to him. He's not doing anything at the minute. He possibly will come. So the next thing, I remember being in the Red Lion on a Saturday night, and who walked in but the chairman at the time, Frank Manning, and one of his directors, a lad called Graham Schofield, who lives in France now. They walked in and they spoke to me and asked me if I'd get involved with Bacup. And yeah, so basically I kind of said, listen, I'm not doing anything at the minute to keep me hand in, but you've got to understand that if any opportunity arises, I really want to go back in the Football League. So if anything arises, I won't be staying, I'll be moving on. They accepted that. So that was on the Saturday, and they were playing top of the league on the Tuesday. So I hadn't long to sort quite a few things out and get amongst it, because they sacked the manager, obviously, and I took over. Yeah, so I were only supposed to be here on a stopgap.
Yeah, for our listeners, to put this in perspective, I guess when I did research about what the league that you were in with Doncaster was, some of the clubs in that league were obviously Brighton, you've mentioned, Fulham, Wigan, Cardiff, Hull, all clubs that have been promoted over time and ended up in the Premier League at some point. You were working in that sort of environment, and then you've now obviously taken a break from football, and then you've ended up now at Bacup Borough, and they had just lost, I think it was 10-0 to Tetley Walker just before you took over. So that's 6 or 7 leagues, I think it was, difference between where you were to where you ended up.
Yeah.
And you said you were very ambitious, and you said you were only going to stay till the end of the season. So you had a short-term plan, and you just said you had to play top of the league. So what was your first thing you did when you agreed to take it on? What was the first thing you did to prepare for that game?
Well, I had watched them a couple of times in a couple of games, and I just felt that they weren't organised. So the first thing I did, I hadn't time really to sign any new players. So I utilised the same players that had been beat 10-0, but I put a bit of a structure in. They were a team that looked like they were disarray, they'd no structure. So I just basically organised them, put a structure in. And one of the first things that I came up with in the league that they were competing in was that I felt that it's all about the strikers and the finishers in the league. And if you could keep them quiet, half your job is done. So I kind of instilled a man marking system. So if the team were playing 4-4-2, not man marking all through the team, but man marking on the back line. So if we were playing an opposition that were against 4-4-2, I'd identify my 2 centre backs. You'd pick him up. You follow him wherever he goes on the pitch. If he drops in, you follow him in. And the other spare player we'd have as a sweeper. And then we'd push the other full back on. So that's how we kind of played it. And to be honest, it worked. I mean, that season, they had no points on the board, and we were well into September when I took over. And that season, we finished mid-table from having no points on the board in September. So for me, that was a success.
So you had a few days, and that's the system you put in place, the man marking. How did you sell that to the players then? Did you just explain it to them and saying, this is what I've watched, this is what I think we should do, this will get us points? Did you have much selling to do?
In a nutshell, this was on back of a 10-0 defeat at Tetley Walker. So in a nutshell, it was quite easy because obviously they buy into anything that was going to help them. And I had to get the mindset right that I'm not here to bang the big drum and wield the axe. We haven't got time to be doing that. I haven't got time to be bringing new players in. we've got top at league and we've just got to go out and do our best and take each game as it comes. So basically, I said, I've got a philosophy. This is how I feel, which is the best way of attacking this. After they've been beat 10, anything that we can keep below that and get down is got to be a bonus. And we actually got our first point on the board. We actually achieved something. So it gave them belief, but the team just needed organising, leadership. And it comes down to that leadership. And from that, obviously, you might look at your centre half who one of them, and he might be a player that lacks pace. We've got away with it that game, so eventually he got replaced by somebody that did have pace. That comes in the next process, if you will. But from initially going in, after being shockingly beaten, and the team all over the place, we just put a structure in place and an organisation. Best way I can describe, even now, even in modern day, we all know what's been going on at Manchester United, and we've seen how disarray they've been. And I've been banging the drum, even talking to my lads around here, why are they letting Bruno be a free spirit? He's centre of midfield. You never used to see Roy Keane, when he's in battle with Patrick Vieira, going out picking ball up on left wing or right wing. It doesn't happen. You just win your battle against your man that you're playing against. And I've been banging the drum for weeks, and then when I've seen that team go to Anfield, but that's only come because they put the right players in them positions. They might not be the best players, like McTominay's taken some stick recently, but that's only because he's not had a leader outside of him. He needs somebody outside of him, and they need to be disciplined. And he proved it because they've gone to Anfield on an informed team and been totally disciplined in what they've got to do. Now, okay, people could turn around and say, yeah, but on another day at the Liverpool, it doesn't matter about another day. They can build on what they did. They can build on that, what they did at Anfield. Now, for me, this is just me and my leadership. If Ten Hag changes it for the next game in the situation they're in, then for me, questions need to be asked to Ten Hag, because he needs to build on what happened at Anfield. Because if he builds on what happened at Anfield, the philosophy can only go better and work better, and they'll pick more points up. Because if he can do that at Anfield, he can do it anywhere. So going back to your Bacup situation, it's all about belief. They've gone and played top of the league, and straight away with a structure and a plan, it's worked. Now, all right, players might have give an extra 20% that they normally give because it's a new manager. But what you've got to do then from that, you've got to manage them situations and build on, like I just said there. There was a lad playing at the back who was not the quickest, and he was playing man marking. So as soon as I could, and more sooner rather than later, we didn't change nothing other than the personnel. I removed him out and put in somebody that's obviously quicker and more athletic that can do the job better.
So you've come in, you've organised, which immediately has probably given them a little bit of confidence. Okay, we've got something, we can execute a plan. How important was that first game for setting in motion what's come since?
That were really important, because from that, the steps that you've taken to progress it, to help it and develop it. But the issue that we've got, which all clubs have, in the levels that we're playing in, we're probably punching above our weight, because financially, because this has a big say in it, financially, you're competing with clubs out there that've got plenty of resources and they're paying players money that you can't compete with. So if you analyse a situation like, for instance, Burnley are in at the minute, Vincent Kompany gets Burnley up out of the Championship. They're coming into a different arena. They're playing into the Premiership. The majority of the clubs in the Premiership have all got world-class players. They've got the top half of it are clubs full of money, and little old Burnley, a town club near the bottom, they haven't got them resources. So they're competing against teams that have got the resources they can replace with better quality player. Burnley can't. So what you've got then, you've got to make sure that every game you go into, and I'm not telling Vincent Kompany how to do his job, but in Burnley's situation, they've got to make sure, like Sean Dyche did for all them years at Burnley, that they were going into battle against your world-class teams and world-class players, that they were staying in the game and they could stay in the game. It might not be exciting for the fans to watch, but it's all about sustainability in a league that really you shouldn't be in because you haven't got the same resources. So this is another kind of pathway, if you will, and another mindset. But that's the way it is. Money's the root of all evil. So going back to the Bacup Borough scenario, I've got the lads in. I've got them believing. I've got them in a setup, and we're competing against teams that really we shouldn't be able to compete with. But because we were organised and structured, the teams all of a sudden who we're playing against had to work tirelessly to break us down to win a game of football.
And now you've kind of started to address what's happening on the pitch. The longer you stay for that season, I guess more and more skeletons are coming out of the closet. You know, you're finding out more of the reality which the club had. So things I've found, like you had a sloped pitch, there were financial problems in the background. What sort of things did you uncover in that first season, which you then had to start putting a plan in place to address?
Well, one of the major issues, and a lot of your guests might not know this, but every ground, every club has to meet stringent ground regulations and ground grading at every level that they're playing at. And one of the issues that I found out whilst I was here at Bacup is that Bacup Borough was on the peripheral of being thrown out of the league because they weren't meeting the ground grading requirements that was required by the FA. They weren't meeting them. There was lots of problems. I mean, spectators, for instance. I mean, there's a school right across the road, and what used to happen, there's an estate at the far end of the ground behind the goals. And what used to happen at 3 o'clock when the school were coming out, there'd be more people on the ground during the week when they're trying to go from that estate to the school. There were more people on the ground than there were watching on a Saturday because what they were doing, they were taking a shortcut because it wasn't enclosed through the stadium to get to the school. So that was a major issue to start with. How come people are walking through the stadium? It's supposed to be enclosed. You know, so there was lots of things that was jumping out the cupboard, and you're thinking, wow, if they didn't meet the ground grading criteria, they wouldn't be playing at the level. They'd have been thrown out, so they wouldn't have been playing at the level that they're playing at today.
Yeah. And in order to sort out those ground grading criteria, I think one of the things you would have needed were floodlights.
Yeah, the floodlights that they had weren't fit for purpose. They were just like car headlights. That's all they were. You know, so that was a major issue as well. They needed floodlights. The money had to be spent on the ground, on the drainage of the pitch, the surroundings of the pitch. You know, it were colossal. It was going to go into like hundreds of thousands of pounds. It was a lot of money that the club didn't have. Basically, the committee, who again are all volunteers, they were just burying their head in the sand. They just couldn't achieve anything. But when they got me here, it were all about football. I didn't know about the politics behind the scenes. It's like if a manager goes in now to Manchester United, I mean, if it weren't fully exposed by the press, well, you'd be talking to your chief exec or your chairman just on football matters. You wouldn't know about what's going on financially or behind the scenes. It's nothing to do with the football manager. It's only when you've gone in and taken the position that these things start coming to the fore, and they do affect you because there's no money to provide for training facilities. There were nothing. You just couldn't do anything. There were no money for any players. Players weren't getting paid. So all you're asking for, amateur footballers to come and play in what is a demanding league that's in the National League system, whereas people are fighting to get promotion because they can go up, as proved in the past with Salford City, although they had the class of 92 behind them, but they were competing in the same league as we were. You know, as Bacup Borough, if you had a look back in that year when I took over, I'm sure you'll find that Salford City were one of the teams in the league. And we were competing against them. And I'm sure that Accrington Stanley wouldn't have been too far away, and neither would the likes of Fleetwood Town, who were competing. All these have just gone on to progress up the system and ended up in the Football League.
Unlock your leadership potential with personalised one-to-one coaching from Lambda Solutions. Take the first step to empowering yourself to overcome any challenges and lead your team to new heights. Our coaching services provide consistent support tailored to your goals and challenges, guiding you through the uncertainty and leading to growth. But that's not all we offer. Our consultancy services extend beyond coaching, encompassing a comprehensive approach to leadership development. Explore our bespoke consultancy packages, which include coaching as a fundamental component. Or if you're seeking something even more tailored, contact us directly through our website to build a solution perfectly suited to your organisation's needs. Visit www.thelambda.co.uk to discover how Lambda Solutions can help you to reach your leadership potential. Together, let's learn, grow, and elevate your organisation to a new level of success. So in that first season then, you came on board to steady the ship. It was meant to be one season and that was it. We've uncovered a lot of the problems that you started to find out in that first season. What made you stay?
I remember it was a turn in the millennium, and I remember the chairman closing the gates at the bottom end of the ground. I said, "That's it now, Frank. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to move on. I set out to do what I set out to do, and I've got to move on." And if you knew the history of this club, you know that the guy I'm talking about has given 50 plus years of his life to football. And he stood there at the gate, and I'm looking at him in the eye, and he's basically saying, "It's the end." And I went, "What do you mean it's the end?" He said, "The club's finished. The club's nothing." And I went, "What do you mean it's finished? You just carry on. No, you've got the foundations in place." Goes deeper than that, Brent. He said, "We're in fighting with the council. We owe a lot of money to the council in rent and rates, and we owe this for that. You know, people are chasing us for money. We've got demands, we've got rates." He said, "There's all this needs spending on the ground. We're never going to make the ground grading. We've been told by the Northwest counties." All these are coming to the table. And anybody who knows about football, it's a bit backwards on in a lot of ways, because what happens is when you get to the end of the football season, you have to pay your subscriptions there and then, basically, to start the next season. So they can't wait. You can't go past deadlines. It's all about deadlines. And if you miss the deadlines, you've gone. So if you don't hit your deadlines on your ground grade, you've gone. If you don't meet your deadline to enter the league that you're competing in, you've gone. If you don't meet the deadlines on the cup competitions that you want to be in, you've gone. So I just sold my furniture and removal and storage business. And I'm not just a football man, a football person. And I know this guy because I'm from the Valley. I know the guy had given 50 plus years of his life to this football club. He was like looking at a little lad that was looking at me in the eye and basically saying, "Oh, no, I'm penniless. We've got nothing. We're going." And it was at a time when there were a lot of football clubs on the peripheral and they were going. And I just said to him, "Listen, I've sold my furniture removal and storage business. I'll tell you what it is. Just let me have a look at these and I'll see what I can pay. I'll enter you win the FA Cup. I'll make sure you're in the FA Cup next year. I'll enter you in the FA Vase. I'll make sure you're in the Vars. I'll make sure that you're in the league. I'll do my best for you. But Frank, I'm ambitious. I need to go. This club isn't going to get me where I want to be. I said, so I will pay this money and I'll pay where I can pay some of the creditors off and help the club out. Basically, that's what I did. But basically, 26 years later, I'm still here.
Yeah. I mean, you've mentioned that you're ambitious. And even then, at that point, you were saying, I'm ambitious. I want to go somewhere. Were you approached by other clubs during that period?
You know what? I once remember a chairman ringing me for some advice, and he rang me up and he said to me, I've monitored your career. And he said, and I spoke to my fellow directors and I said, you're the man that we need at this football club. He said, because everywhere that you've been and everything you've achieved, you've always been at a club where there's been very little money. He said, but you've always been successful. He said, but I've got to be honest. He said, I knew because I knew that you'd put money into Bacup to help him out. And I knew that we were flogging a dead horse. We wouldn't have got you. And I went, well, how do you know you wouldn't have got there? I said, that's kind of not right. I said, because if you'd have made the approach, it's something I'd have had to think about. I said, because, I've done what I've done is to help save the club and help it out because it's a valid club and it's a club that I wouldn't say I've been close to because I hadn't, because my allegiances were always with Rosendale United, who incidentally have gone. And I once got told, my personal assistant, who's here now today, she's in the same conversation where a former director of Rosendale United turned round and said to her and said to me, Bacup Borough will never outweigh Rosendale United in this valley. And let me tell you, Rosendale United have long gone, and there's houses on that ground. And I've said that will never happen at this football club. Let's be honest, this isn't about Brent Peters. This is about people that's played for this football club over years and generations, and their families and their uncles, the dads, the granddads, the great granddads played for this football club. The spectators that's come out when they've achieved things and won things, the hundreds of people that supported them. You can't let the history of a football club just go like that. Can't happen. It's big in the community. Basically, that was something else. So going back to what you said about was I approached? Well, I wasn't approached, but I've been told that people think they wouldn't have got me. When you look at a situation where Bacup Borough was like a nothing club, and then all of a sudden it's attracted publicity because of my profile. As you think about it, all of a sudden it's like me signing David May attracted publicity, lots of publicity. But for Bacup Borough, as daft as it seems, for their next manager to come after a 10-0 defeat, is coming from Football League, Doncaster Rovers, it's big news. Why would he go to Bacup Borough? So all this is carried. And then all of a sudden, I've done what I've done for the football club. But there's been reasons behind it because I didn't want this football club going the same way that other football clubs have gone. But what it did do, it stopped me because I put the investment in. It actually stopped me physically applying for jobs. There's a difference. It's a two-way sword here because when jobs come available, they want you to apply and you don't apply. So if you don't apply, you're not in the running. But then there's the other scenario where sometimes a club will think about approaching, but then, as it has been told to me, they haven't approached, but they thought of approaching because they thought that through my help and guidance, I would have turned that approach down. But it's like the old saying, you never know until you ask.
In a sense, through the eyes of hindsight, then, by investing in the club at that time and helping to rescue and not just steady the ship, but make sure it's still around today, you, in a sense, sort of closed down your career that could have potentially gone, higher up the pyramid.
Yeah, I look back, Chris, at times and think, it stopped me. I were progressing well with my coaching, badges, everything else, because you had to do when you're in the Football League. This is another thing. When you're in the Football League, everything goes through Football League. So they'd say, right, there's no games on a Sunday now for the academy. Every fourth Sunday, you'd go to Warwick University or whatever, and you'd have what they call a promotion day where all the coaches are being coached, if you will, and advancing in the mindset and the careers, and obviously ticking boxes that get you the points. And then you go on to get your pro license, all things like that. Well, all that came to a stop when I did what I did for Bacup, because the job was that big that I couldn't basically go anywhere. I'm just focused on the job in hand because it was that big. And, I had 10 years of infighting with the Rosendale Council. It was horrendous. Just to try and get the club on an equal playing field.
That was in part getting the stadium and the ground, wasn't it?
And the lease, because the lease, what they had, it wasn't fit for purpose. It was like the club was in a really, really vulnerable, and I mean vulnerable position. Really vulnerable position.
Part of what I've also read in terms of your tenure there as well is you took a HGV driving role to also help fund it.
Yeah, so again, I come back to this situation. Let me explain. If you were going to go and buy a business, the first thing you do when you're buying a business, you go along with your business advisor, and what you do, you'd look at the books and you'd look at its potential, and you look at its debtors and your creditors and everything else, and then you'll make a decision. Is it worthwhile to take on board or not? And then you'd start to negotiate a price. That's if you're buying anything, shop, business, whatever, any sort of business. And if you weren't happy with certain things, you go back to the drawing board and ask, and things can take the time and it's time consuming, but you've got to make sure it's right. Now, in terms of a football situation, these things can't happen. Why they can't happen is because if you don't meet the deadlines, you're finished. So there comes a situation, this football club has got a major problem with its lease. The lease was owned by kind of three individuals, and it was those three individuals that owned the lease at the time that the council was having problems with. It wasn't really Bacup Borough Football Club, even though they represented the football club. It was just the way that the lease was set up. The council was having issues with these people who were Bacup Borough Football Club. So what's happened is that the football club was on the peripheral of finishing going. So that would have been the end of it. There'd have been no football club. So all the history would have all gone. Now then, obviously, all chairman's bothered about is keeping the football club. So he needed help. So financially, I gave him that help. But it didn't mean because I were giving him the finances that had to help, I wanted to stay. I didn't. I wanted to move, right? I was going. But because he was kind of on his own, it got to a situation and he kept coming to me and like advice and everything else. It's ended up where I'm basically here. So then it got to the situation where I'm speaking to the council just to get the football club on an equal footing. And it kind of wasn't happening. It was a million miles apart. But while all this is going on, you still got to put a football team out there on the park. You still got to play. You still got to compete for a 9-month season. Now, if I had to tell you, just to put this in perspective, I came here as manager, I think it was 1997, and it was 2010 before a fit for purpose lease was sorted out. So in all that time, this football club had to keep going and still had to compete in games and compete and fulfill its league fixtures and fulfill its obligations to its creditors and everything else. It had to keep going. But there's a long time. So in that time, it had to keep going. It ended up where one of the first things that I kind of set about to do was to make it a place where you could bring your partner and it were comfortable, where you could sit, relax, enjoy the football. Other people could bring their partners. It was nice and presentable. It had to be like that. Otherwise, you know, it weren't going anywhere. It was just a lockup. It was dilapidated. It was terrible. It was horrible. And it wouldn't have attracted anybody. Never mind if you wanted a good player, a footballer, they won't come. Because the two things that footballers want, they want money. And if they can't get money, they want to play in a decent facility. And if you're not offering either, you're on a dead duck. So basically, all this had to be implemented and had to go along. And the guy needed help. So I were here to help him. And it got to a situation whereby basically I went through a personal bankruptcy to save the football club. And I did that because I said, whatever happens, Brent Peters will rise from the ashes. If Bacup Borough loses its status, that's it, it's gone. And there's such the community. So I took this hit for the football club. That was on all the placards. The press picked it up and I'd done it to save the football club, basically. So when I did that, one of the first things that I had to do, I had a Class 1 license, HGV license. I also have a PSV, so I can drive coaches. So I got a job at night, where at night I was going out driving for TNT, it were then, which is now part of FedEx Group, but it were TNT at the time. So I was going out at night, and all the salary that I were earning through driving through the night, working for TNT, came to the football club. Didn't go home, didn't go anywhere else, went into the football club. This was the only way that I could now get the football club back on an equal, helping the chairman, Frank Manning, get the football club on an equal field. I was going out at night, then during the day, I'd come off a night shift and I'd be up here and I'd be helping all wherever I could help. When I got tired, I had a caravan on the side and I'd get my head down in the caravan. But this was a rebuilding process and it was all to save the football club. And that's what's happened. So I kind of worked for TNT, and from TNT I went working for a short time at Warburton's Bread as well as a bread salesman. And that again, my salary from that came into the football club. It was all to keep the football club, to start afresh for the football club, to keep it so it could carry on. And all this time, 10-year, well, 12-year really, from me coming in, this is why I say it's different than buying any other business. You'd walk away and then you go back, or they might ring you up and say, listen, we've had a rethink. Can't do that in football. There's a deadline. You finish at end of the season in May, on the 4th of May. Everything's got to be in by, 1st of June, 2nd of June. All got to be ticked off, all got to be paid for, all got to be in. And then you put where you're going to play, and then you've got to have all your ground so it's ready. Well, we were in a situation here at Bacup Borough, or they were in, not me at the time, because I bought myself into helping them. We're in a situation where it become a major problem that, time we're running out. So do you put this money in? Do you find this money? Or do you not? And wait till it's all put in place. But by the time it had all got put in place, it had been 12 years on and the club would have been well gone. So it had to be there and then. That's why I say it's totally different than buying a business.
I mean, that's a massive personal investment you've done in terms of finances and time. And obviously that's impacted not just you, that would have impacted your family as well. How supportive have they been throughout that process?
Massively supportive, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without that. I mean, I'm looking at the time, my wife, she was working for a benefits agency, so she had a good job. But I'm in a situation where I've always said, whatever I'd want to do, I'll do. And I don't want it to affect them. And everything they want to do, they do. So it doesn't affect me. That's kind of the way it is. If it's something I want to do, if I wanted to, do something which could be a bit risky, I make sure that it's not going to affect my family. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of way that it's always been. And that's the way we're here. Yeah, I took a massive hit, but I decided to do that, because, like I said, and that was my quote to the press at the time, Brent Peters will rise from the ashes, Bacup Borough will, and it wouldn't have done. It would have gone.
So I guess keeping the club alive, that must be one of your greatest achievements you've ever actually been a part of.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember last year on my 25th anniversary, I was after shot by national press. ITV came and did an interview with me. BBC did an interview. Sky did an interview with me. And one of the questions I was asked, what's your greatest achievement to date? And while I've been at Bacup Borough, there's a lot of clubs in the history and out there that's never been to cup finals, never mind won. I'm thankful we've been to cup finals. We've won in cup finals since I've been here. We've lost in cup finals since I've been here. And we've won a championship since I've been here. But my biggest achievement, and will remain my biggest achievement, is waking up every morning and knowing full well where there's other historic football clubs around the country losing their status and losing their history because they've gone out of business, knowing full well that this football club is another year older, its history's intact, and we're still alive and kicking. And that means more to me than winning any trophy, because that's the challenge I've had, and that's the challenge I still have.
So in that time then, you've spent 26 years at the club, you've rescued it, you've kept it alive, and it still keeps ticking over now, it's still alive. What core values have you tried to instill within the club? What culture have you tried to instill that's going to last beyond your tenure there? So when you eventually do move on and away from the club, what are you going to be leaving behind?
Well, one of the most important things that I'd said at any football club, and I've instilled this here, and it's massively important. When people talk and say there wouldn't be a football club here if Brent Peters wasn't here, and one of the things that I've kind of said all along is the most important person at any football club is not the manager, which I am. It's the person that brings in the finances. I am an advocate that I don't think for 1 minute a lot of football clubs do this, and we shouldn't do it, is you should never rely on your gate income, because your gate income is not guaranteed. So if you can't guarantee your gate income, one thing you have to make sure that you get right and guaranteed is that your commercial department is on top of its job, massively on top of its job. And one thing that I've done here and instilled all the time here is to ensure that the commercial side of the business is running as good as it can run. Because without the business fraternity buying in to what we are offering, and without the support buying in to what we are offering, there wouldn't be a football club. That is the key. It's a costly exercise. In fact, running a football club seriously is a cash cow at every level. But you've got to be ahead of the game commercially. Now, what I'm talking now is not going out with a begging bowl, because far from it. It's a business within a business. So if you've got a football club business, you've also got what I class as another business, which is kind of on the par with an advertisement agency. So what you do, you implement situations at the football club that the business fraternity will buy into to promote their business. So when people say, you'll hear it all the time at some of these football clubs, yeah, we could do with a blinking, a rich benefactor. Hang on, rich benefactors, multimillionaires, they haven't got to be in rich and multimillionaires by giving their money away to a local football club. They will invest in one, but they'll want money in return for their investment. So what you've got to do, that's never going to happen. If you're going to live the pipe dream and waiting for some multimillionaire to come in and drop you through, how long's that going to last? You're just throwing money away. So you've got to make money work. And the only way you can do that, in my opinion, is you've got a facility and a football ground. And within that facility, whether it be your function room of your bar or whether it be out there in the stadium, you've got to introduce platforms, varying platforms, that then you can go out to the business fraternity and say to them, we can offer you exposure to thousands of people if you invest into our, for instance, on a Friday, we do a podcast called The Rewind Show. My head of media has my attention for about an hour and a half, and he's got me direct. So if he can ask me, why did you make that substitution on Saturday? And I'll tell him openly why I've done it. Have you got any new players coming in the pipeline? I'll openly tell him if we have or we haven't. It's a unique platform, basically, because they've got the manager giving reasons he's done something on a platform. Now, that platform, we can give exposure to businesses. Like we've got the main sponsor on it now, which is Tourist Cult, which is the clothing brand, Tourist Cult. Now, for instance, they've invested money not to give Bacup Borough money. They've invested money to go onto this platform because it's getting exposure through the internet and all our media channels. So there's thousands of people all over the world, really, to key in to the Rewind Show on a Friday. Even now, if you backtrack, they're all there. It's all interconnected to Bacup Borough. So it's a platform. So people buy into it and we're making money. So then we introduce, like we've got the Brent Pie, which is Deborah's forte, my personal assistant. Now, Brent Pie did so well because the groundhoppers and everybody loves it, that it drew attention from Sky Sports. So we've been featured several times on Sky Sports over the Brent Pie. So it's famous, Brent Pie. So basically, what I'm trying to say is people can advertise on the back of that. In the ground and in the stadium, we can build up various promotional items where businesses can advertise the wares through everything that we've got. So we're not going with a bagging ball and say, can you give us £1,000 today? What we are doing, we're selling products for £1,000, but basically they're getting the exposure for the product for the money that they're putting in. So my legacy, wherever going forward, that side of the business has got to be right. Because if that side of the business is not right, your club is not functional or will struggle to function. Digressing here a little bit, when there's a giant killing where a non-league club has beat a football league club in the FA Cup, a few days later, what happens? Manager gets sacked because they don't like it, because there's prize money involved. So they think, well, we've only got Bacup Borough next round of cup. That's worth £5,000 to us when we win that, but they don't win it. But they put £5,000 in the budget because they think they're going to win it. And then they don't get it, so it's not in the budget. So where do they take the frustration? They sack the manager. It's wrong. Non-league clubs do it. We played a non-league club. I remember several years ago, we played a non-league club. And my chairman said to me, this is my chairman, we played, I think it was Camel Laird. And he said, tell you what, manager will be sacked by next week. I said, do you think so? He said, I'm telling you. He said, because they've already told me they're calling a board meeting because they expected to beat us. They were playing 3 leagues above us at the time. And because we were playing 3 leagues above us and we've knocked them out the FA Cup, they sacked him. So what I'm saying is football clubs need the commercial side right. If they get that right, it happens at every level. If you look at it now, the bigger clubs, I mean, you only have to go down to London and look at Chelsea, and there's an hotel latched onto it. It's all the business side of it that would keep the football club ticking over.
Yeah. It's sustainability, kind of what you're talking about, like making sure the money's coming in regardless to keep it afloat.
Yeah.
I mean, you see it all the time, and you've mentioned it in non-league football, where you do have people that massively front load and invest up until about Christmas time, because that's when all the cup competitions are happening. And as soon as they're knocked out of the cup, the money dries up, players go, managers change.
Yeah, correct.
So in terms of you and your managerial aspects then. So you've kept the club afloat, you've got this legacy that you want to keep the club around sustainability. But in terms of your managerial approach, you mentioned earlier that, if we talk to some of your players from early on in your time, the hairdryer treatment would have come out. So that to me suggests that you've changed your approach over time. How have you changed your approach, and why have you changed your approach?
I wouldn't say I've changed my approach. I used to go in the changing room. I mean, if you watch these video clips of even now and Neil Warnock back in the day, if you watch video clips, you'll see what he's like in the changing room. I kind of probably were like that, where you kind of like throwing things about. I mean, I can tell you tales on here. I mean, we don't do it now. They don't get tea at half time. But there's been a table there where there's been teapot on. And just the way the situation, I've gone storming in the changing room, and then this blinking freaking slammed the door open, and the blinking tea's gone all over somebody sat there and nearly blinking scolded them. I've kind of done that in the past and lost it a little bit in the past. But I think as you go older, I've got a bit more wiser. And in the wiser, where I'm not saying I can't lose it, I can lose it. Believe me, I can lose it. But I think I'm a bit more kind of grounded, a bit better. I don't explode the same. And I think sometimes when I think back, firing from the hip and firing off like I did, people aren't switching on to what we're saying because they're probably living in more fear than anything. And it's not a fear factor. There's a video now that's on my YouTube, and it were a fly on the wall documentary of me in a changing room. This were only done within the last 5 years, I'm sure it were. And I didn't know it was being done. And you know what? I kind of like it because when I played it back, it was an FA Vars game. And I'm calm, I'm collected, I get my points across. There's two players were having a blinking argument on the pitch, and I've gone, use the terminology. What you two doing, having a board meeting on the pitch? Because they're like, well, players going on. So you haven't got time to have a board meeting on the pitch. But, there's things I'm saying in it, and you can see it yourself. Just go on YouTube. It's there. Fly on the wall, Brent Peters. And when I look at that, everything's calm. I can see players listening and they're focused and they're taking it in. Whereas if you go in losing it, like I said about Neil Warnock and things like that, I don't think they take it in because they don't take it in because they're on the edge, they're in fear. That's not going to get your results. Calmness will get your points across. Having said that, there are certain criteria that you have to have in a changing room where a player doesn't come back at you or tries to come back at you. That's when I can use the hairdryer treatment. So, like for instance, even this season, we got knocked out of the cup match at New Mills. We dominated the game. And my right fullback, it was ridiculous what he did on his decision making. The ball were on the opposite side of where he were playing, and there's a player in front of him, but his man's behind him. And instead of like talking to the man in front of him, the centre half to drop off a little bit and be aware that there's a defender there, he's tried to go in. So he's actually gone into no man's land. And as he's gone into no man's land and this ball's come in, it's fell to the bloke that's behind him and who's just completely finished it. So obviously, I'm not right happy. So I've gone in at full time. So he's tried to argue his point. Well, that's when you'll get the air drying treatment. Because then your decibels go from here to up there. You'll go for the juggler. You get me? Because he should listen. Got to listen. If he wants his say, he can have his say when I say after. Have you anything to say about that? But his adrenaline's going and he's having pelters thrown at him, which were constructive, but he's reacted. So that's when the air drying treatment can kick in because everybody's adrenaline's pumping and they should not be responding or reacting back.
In terms of your approach then, you're more level-headed, but you still have the passion and the ability to just, if you need to, get your point across, as you've just said there. Have you had to maybe adapt or change your approach to the fact that different generations of people are now in front of you in the changing rooms? Because you've got older through your 26 years there. The players are roughly going to be in their 20s. So their generations are getting younger and therefore they're different type of people. Have you had to adapt your approach at all?
I'll tell you what I've had to adapt my approach to more than anything. A lot of the players I've got now have never been in what I would class as a professional environment. They've only been in an amateur. They haven't been guided in an amateur. Now, when they come into our environment, they're learning because, it's all about discipline. Now, when you've got players that have been in the professional environment, because they've come through the academies, immediately that they're coming into, immediately they're hitting like 15, 16, 17, 18. The mindsets of the coaches will bring them into a more of a mindset where they've got to be more disciplined. It's like going in the army. If you go in the army, talking about how you fold your clothes up, how you neat and tidy, discipline, you can't come back to a sergeant major, you've got to be blinking on the money, you've got to be disciplined. Now, if you've never been in the army, then especially going back to the street kids that have been brought up and kicked up recently off the council estate, right? They've got to be trained up somehow to make sure that they're more disciplined, on all front. When I talk about discipline, I talk about, like, for instance, not arguing back with a referee. You've got to accept decisions. Items like that, it's all about discipline. What I've found is when you've got kids that have been released at Football League clubs, but they've been released at Football League clubs at 18 or 19, and they haven't got a pro contract, right, and they come into your environment, you're halfway there with them because they kind of understand and they've been in a winning mentality changing room, Now, they've seen it, but if a kid hasn't been in an academy and hasn't been in a pro environment, and all he's done is played for his school team, and then from school team he's gone and played for Roy of the Rovers Athletic down the road, and where their coach is like just gone and said, we've got a game on Sunday or we've got a game on Saturday and we're playing Bolton Athletic, and they're playing Bolton Athletic and it's just a game of football, and they're supposed to meet at like 1:30, but they wreck up at 2:00. They don't get told, well, I told you 1:30. They're totally indisciplined, but they still go out and play football. Now, when they come into our environment, that culture has got to be changed. If we say it's 1:30, they've got to be in the changing room at 1:30. They can't roll in with a 2:00 mentality and still get picked. So you somehow, as a manager, you've got to instill that back to them. You can't come in here. If we tell you you've got to be dressed with a checkered shirt and tie on, I don't want to see you coming in with jeans. All this is kind of mindset. Now, if they've been in a pro environment, all that comes natural because that's a graduation of a skill factor, bringing it up to them. So when they get released, if they were a pro or they're fighting to get a pro contract, they're already geared and ready to play in a big arena because they've been schooled to that. If they get released and we pick them up, well, it's the same. They're used to it. So they're the same. The ones that aren't used to it is the amateurs that haven't had that and they haven't had that schooling. And that's where I find there's a difference. And that's where you've got to work twice as hard, not with the ones that's been around the pro environment, with the ones that have never been around the pro environment. And that is, I wouldn't say difficulty, but that's where you get the indiscipline comes from because you've got to make them. And the trouble is, if you pick a player up, let's say a player's played all his career. When I say all his career, he's come out of school, he's played amateur football, and he's now 23-year-old, and we've spotted him and think, you know what, he's got potential, and I'm going to bring him in. He could step up into our arena, and you bring him in. He's 23-year-old, by the way. All that, what gradually gets instilled into you at a pro level, at a pro club, he's never had, and he's 23-year-old. So trying to get him that changeover can be difficult because he doesn't know any different and he's 23. Whereas if you get somebody at 14 that doesn't know any different, by the time they're 23 and you've been with them, they will know different because you've worked with them and you've put that mentality into them. So as a football manager, it's not just about big teams. It's the whole package, isn't it? It's about instilling discipline into players. Like even a simple thing like I'll send a text message out giving them instruction on the squad that's been picked. It'll go out on a text message. And I'll turn around on that text message and it'll say, ensure you respond to this text message. Now, there's reasons why I ask them to respond. Because if that player, because he's not in the pro game, he's at work and he's had an accident at work and he's now in A&E, last person he's going to contact me to tell me he's in A&E because he might be on a blinking bed waiting to go down for an operation or whatever. So he's not going to tell me. So if I don't send a text message on here that says, respond to this text to confirm you've received it, I would never know he's received it. So they have to respond. Now, if they don't respond after a certain time, I'll send them another one. Then I'll try ringing. And if they don't pick up, then the alarm bells start to ring. What will happen is you'll get some players that kind of might not reply to the text and might be all right. So then I've got to pull them in. Oh, I forgot. So I pull them in and I go, you can't afford to forget because I'll tell you now, how do I know that something's not happened to you? And then that makes them think, oh, I never thought of it that way. Now you know. That's exactly right. Never had that. And this is what I'm saying. So the similarity, so if you get a player that's come through an academy level that's gone on to get an apprenticeship at a football club, but miss out on the pro contract, in that terms of their apprenticeship, before they've got that pro contract, the chances are they'll have had discipline instilled in them in what they've got to do and everything. So when they come to a non-league club, right, we've already been processed, if you will, and they understand. But the ones that haven't been in that environment and never had it instilled in them, they just think it's the norm, what they've always done. And then that's when you've got to get them where they're more disciplined. And the older they are, the more difficult it becomes.
So a closing tradition I have on this podcast is to ask my guests to have a little think about some advice. If you were to go back and maybe speak to a younger you or someone who might be listening right now who's starting their journey in any form of leadership, any form of managerial position, what piece of advice have you learned along the way that you could impart?
Well, I think that the first thing you've got to do is they've got to have a mindset of what career path they want to take. And by that, I mean, you can't one day think I'm going to be a football or try to be a football league scout. A month later, you decide to be, no, I'm not going to be a scout anymore. I'm going to be a football coach. And then another 4 weeks later, you think, no, I'm not going to be a football coach. I wouldn't mind doing a bit of physiotherapy or getting to sport physiotherapy. And then another few weeks think, you know what, I think I'll be a manager. No, because when you start doing things like that, every position that you're going into has different thought process and mindsets. So you, as a younger person, in my opinion, if you're ambitious and you want to do something in your head that's really ambitious, I think you've got to get your mindset focused on the line that you want to take. So going back to what I wanted to do, I knew, even though I was primed to be a coach, I was taking my qualifications to be a coach. I was actually working with people to be a coach. I knew 100% I wanted to be the next Sir Alex Ferguson at a top club, right? Now, for me to be that, I needed to have the mindset of going out into the field to managing the lesser clubs with the same responsibilities as Sir Alex, but in a lesser way. But I was focused for that to take me to where I'd want to be. And that for me would give me a better chance of achieving that goal than, well, do I want to do a bit of that? And then by doing that, you haven't got a direct pathway, and then you become jack of all trades, master of none. You've got to get the mindset right and taper yourself to challenge yourself to go for that, what you want to do.
That's a great bit of advice. Setting your mind on a goal and pursuing it rather than scattergunning.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a great bit of advice. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your story and for sharing all of your experience along the way. Our listeners, I know, are going to take a lot from that conversation. So thank you very much.
I hope it were all right for you, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, it was excellent. Thank you. Yeah. Got into a lot of very in-depth stuff. So thank you so much.
No problem. All the best.
All the best. Thank you. And until next time, remember, to lead requires us to continuously